From being spoiled from day one by her absent father to her ultimate death and how the love of her life reacted, have you ever heard of Casey Johnson?
I'm pretty sure the name rings a bell because of her famous last name, but don't beat yourself up if you can't picture her. She went from once being on the cover of magazines and living in the fast lane to being at the bottom of the food chain. Born to Woody Johnson and Nancy Sale, Casey was a part of the Johnson & Johnson family. That's right. The world's second largest healthcare company, worth $381.7 billion. Casey's great-great-great-grandfather, Robert Wood Johnson, was one of the three Johnson brothers who started the company in 1886. Casey grew up with everything anyone could have ever wanted. She was all set to inherit a reported $1 billion, and she was enjoying life as part of the 1%. At the age of 8, however, doctors realized that she was suffering from type 1 diabetes. This meant that she had to constantly monitor her blood sugar and regularly have insulin injections. Woody started a juvenile diabetes foundation in honor of Casey, and along with her parents, Casey co-wrote a book on managing a child with diabetes. The young girl's real problem was overindulgence by her father. Woody and Nancy split up in 2001, and that was when the former model let it all out. She claimed that Woody wasn't the doting father everyone thought he was. Sure, he bought Casey a luxury car for her birthday, but that was before she even had a driving license. Nancy revealed that of the 3 children with Woody, Casey was the most difficult to raise. Her father didn't know how to deal with her, and he would just throw money at the problem. So, what did Casey do? She decided to only hang out with people who had money. You see, Casey was born into the new generation of heirs and heiresses. Some of her rich and famous friends included the Hilton sisters and Nicole Richie. This new generation of rich kids had the same rules as their rich parents. Don't talk about your money, don't bring attention to yourself, and whatever you do, don't bring shame to the family name. However, the only difference during Casey's time was that the rich kids didn't want to stay in the shadows anymore. Page 6 ran a whole article on Casey, claiming that she dropped out of Brown University because her puppy, Zoe, wasn't allowed in the dorms. Eventually, the media dubbed her the baby oil heiress. Casey got so fed up with it, actually, that the heiress decided it was best to start fresh in Los Angeles. She claimed that everyone in LA is famous for their work in Hollywood and that the last person anyone really cared about there was just another rich kid. That might have been the goal, but it wasn't long until Casey was sucked into the glitz and glam of Beverly Hills. She soon announced that she wanted to be an actress too. Sometime later, Paris Hilton was announced to star in The Simple Life, and it was rumored that Casey would join her as her co-star. We all know that Nicole Richie eventually got that role, but that was because Casey turned down Paris's offer, claiming that no one would take her seriously as an actress for starring in a reality show. Let's just say Casey missed out big time. And she knew it. She'd eventually rant and ramble to publications, claiming that the biggest mistake of her life was to turn down The Simple Life. Casey would later reveal that she felt like she had no purpose. Paris used her fame from The Simple Life to book more acting gigs, and Nicole used the negative press as a wake-up call to pull away from the spotlight and start a family of her own. While her friends were headed in one direction or another, Casey was sort of stuck in the middle, and she reportedly felt lost. It didn't help that, in addition to struggling for roles in Hollywood, her house was broken into in 2004, and the burglars made away with hundreds and thousands of dollars worth of merchandise. So, when she met model Nicole Lentz at a party a little while after the incident, she immediately accused her of orchestrating the break-in. Things turned violent, and Casey was slapped with a $1 million lawsuit. The case was ultimately settled for $25,000, but the bad press was enough for Woody to fly over and warn his adult daughter that one more headline and she'd be out of the will. In 2006, Casey and her then-boyfriend, John D., went on a trip with Casey's aunt, Libet Johnson. At some point during the trip, Casey and John broke up, and the heiress made the journey back to LA on her own. Page 6 smelled something fishy and claimed to have uncovered emails proving an affair between Libet and John. Still, before publishing those emails, they called Casey for a comment, and boy, did she have a lot to say. Realizing that his daughter had gone off the deep end, Woody Johnson reportedly washed his hands off Casey for good. The negative press surrounding the incident and the rift it caused in the family were enough for Casey to take a step back and re-examine her life. She started actively volunteering at several charitable foundations and claimed that she was going to make sure Ava, her adopted daughter, would be nothing like her. Her new life lasted for just shy of a year, though, and after her father had her escorted off his property by the police, Casey sank back into the hole she'd tried to crawl out of. The only thing that could save her now was love. The baby oil heiress, well, not exactly by now, started dating Courtney Semmel, another member of the affluent kids group who had also been severed by her father. 2009 was a year when Cassie just couldn't run away from the press, and it didn't help that her relationship with Courtney was incredibly toxic. To add to everything else that was going on, Casey hadn't been taking care of her health either. In August 2009, she was hospitalized for complications with diabetes. Nancy had threatened to take Ava away if Casey's self-destructive behavior continued. Now, cut off from everyone, Casey was struggling. In an interview with US Weekly, Casey claimed that while Paris was still one of her best friends, she hated how the Hilton heiress was living a great life, while hers was a constant nightmare. She attempted to take her life in November 2009, but thankfully Courtney called an ambulance just in time. This still wasn't enough for Casey to turn her life around, and she reportedly broke into Jasmine Leonard's home, stole her stuff, and then sold most of it and kept some. Courtney recognized the stolen items Casey was now wearing and called the police on her. This was enough for Courtney actually to pull away from Casey once and for all. But you know what they say, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Or girlfriend in this case. After Courtney's ultimate betrayal, Casey was determined to do anything possible to hurt her, and one way was to date her ex-girlfriend, Tila Tequila. Not just date. Actually, Casey and Tila were reportedly engaged. This happened within a month of the heiress's arrest. You have to remember something here. Tila hated Courtney and reportedly filed multiple lawsuits against their joint ex. That's all everyone believed Tila was to Casey anyway. Just a way to get back at Courtney, her parents, and everyone who'd wronged her. Casey soon found herself constantly getting into fights with her fiancé and then making up with drugs and alcohol. Things got so bad eventually that even Tila announced she was done with Casey within 2 weeks of their alleged engagement. Casey, the girl who was always surrounded by flashing lights and cameras, was now all alone, crashing at a friend's house on New Year's Eve. It was reported that she was at her lowest point, and on January 4th, 2010, it was announced that Cassie Johnson had passed away. The autopsy and toxicology report showed that Casey had not been drinking the night before she was found. The coroner's report indicated that Casey had died of natural causes. Officially, her death was a result of diabetic ketoacidosis. The last person to have seen her alive was a psychiatrist who concluded that Casey's mental health had deteriorated and that she was afraid Casey would hurt herself again. Experts believe that years of alcohol abuse caused Casey to develop insulin resistance, to the point that her insulin pump was ineffective. She'd been in one too many diabetic comas throughout her life, but she had always pulled through. This time, though, there was something else that contributed to her passing: a broken heart. Casey was found unresponsive in her guest house days after she'd already passed. Tila was the first one to comment, well, sort of comment on it. She appeared dolled up outside of her home and announced that she was excited for her scheduled Larry King interview. Yeah, that interview was canceled. As for her parents, Nancy very publicly acknowledged her grief over Casey's passing, while it was reported that Woody was also devastated, but never made a public comment. So, from her ultimate death and how the love of her life reacted to it, to being spoiled from day one by her absent father, that was a deep dive into the sad and tragic life of the baby oil heiress, Casey Johnson.